So he couldn't call 911 because he couldn't reach his phone. His wife was in her own bedroom, shut the door away where she wasn't even waking up to the sound of his voice. He was in agonizing pain and he wished he could call 911 to get help. And he had to wait until she woke up at 11:30 in the morning because she has to get her beauty sleep for her mental health, to find him still laying on the floor in agony. Used a goiter belt to lift him up again, get him into the car, take him to urgent care. And then urgent care said, "Why the heck did you take him here? We're getting him sent to the hospital. We're getting an ambulance now to the ER." To find out he had 3 broken ribs. And leaving him as he was, he could have had internal bleeding. Doing the goiter belt, or however you call it, could have caused him to have broken or damaged his internal, ribs even more. It was such a terrible circumstance and so badly neglectful that that's what started me to petition for trying to get guardianship, because she just seemed so incapable. Well, anyways, I had her friend who had been living at the house and helping and witnessing the abuse. I had the neighbor. I had other neighbors who had seen her, even in the driving in their community, where she would just freeze in the middle of the road in her car, get locked up, couldn't drive. Car would just be in the middle of the road on the wrong side of the road. She would just be frozen. She'd start banging her head on the steering wheel. It was very concerning that she could even have to be able to drive that car without getting in an accident. And it was something that, again, the neighbor said, is this something we should report next time? And they were like, yes, please report it, because that's very scary when she's my dad's only transport at that time. Well, things kept going on, and she kept, distancing me from him even more. Called the police when we tried to come to the house because now we were a threat to her. She banned me from seeing any of his medical records because she said that I was harassing doctors, and they were saying they were annoyed by me harassing them, when obviously she wasn't happy with the decision that caught her. And when he did get to the hospital, he was told that second time that he had sepsis, he has borderline pneumonia, and he had a catheter infection from an unchanged proper catheter. These things could have escalated into his death. So if I hadn't intervened, he could have died in her home earlier, which would have probably made her happy, unfortunately. So here we are again, where I keep getting pushed farther and farther away from my father, which is not what I want to do, but I wanted to be able to make sure he was able to enjoy the last bits of his life and have the best experience, have the best Christmas, make Christmas cookies like we used to, be around my animals, see my home that he never seen, and he always wanted to. Well, every time he could express it. So many times he said it, even on videos that I have. Anytime she would say, "Oh, he just doesn't want to leave his house," I would immediately go over to him to confirm this, and he would be like, "No, I'd love to be able to come see your house and the animals. When can we do this?" And I was like, "I already had the bed. I already had a chair that would help stand him up. It was one of those electronic chairs to help the elderly stand to their feet. I had, the whole bathroom set up so he could even just wheel on in through the house because there was very open doors. He could go to the bathroom, have a non-slip mat, have the railing, have the sitting area. Everything was set up for him, in case, even if he just visited. I said, we will take him for like a weekend or just a week or like whatever you feel comfortable with, if you would comply to that. I'm not saying I have to steal him from you, but we're here to help." But she was not going to allow that, because then she would lose control, and the person that she despised most, my dad's own daughter, would end up having some kind of benefit, I guess. And she just couldn't, someone she despised so much, she just couldn't allow that to happen, even if it was exactly what my dad would want, what he needed. So she started sending messages from his phone, and they were from her, and they were insulting me, saying I was a terrible daughter and that he was disappointed in me and that he couldn't believe my actions. But they were all her. And I even was able to, one night, message my dad on Facebook, and he responded immediately, called me, and I told him everything that was going on. And he was coherent enough to understand that she was manipulating these messages, sending these terrible things to me. But then she took over his Facebook, and I thought that maybe I had a way I could finally communicate with him, but she found out. And I hate it because I could have got him in more trouble, but what I was doing was just trying to find some way to have communication, contact, anything, and I don't see what's wrong with that. We weren't trying to badmouth her. All we were trying to do is, A, I was telling the truth of the situation so he understood, and B, just clarify, I don't mean harm, I don't mean ill will, and I really just want the best for you and your health and your well-being, and that's all it's ever been. But she's taking this personally. So then it becomes months in between being able to see him. APS kind of would push it, and they would get a visit in because APS would push things, and then it would just, they back off because she got a visit in. And then we would try to push for another visit, and soon his own mom was being pushed out of his life and having any access to information and being able to see or talk to him. So soon she just had to randomly start driving to his house and showing up and hoping she wouldn't be turned away and would be able to see her firstborn son before he died. And that is terrible. And so my Nana ended up having to be that middle person. She had to be that person who's trying to be the peacekeeper now, to be able to preserve any chance for me to be able to have any relationship in his final days, and months to weeks to who knows how long ahead. So then, I started seeing all the black and blue and the bruising and the terrible just all over his body, solid black patches. And, this was just falls. She even would say falls. His wife would just say, yeah, he's falling a lot, causes falls. And that's very concerning again, because he started to get so bad during his radiation period, and I'm sure the radiation didn't help, but the falls got worse too. And so then he just became completely bedridden because he didn't have the support, where Ben, my boyfriend, could come in, scoop him up like a little bride and carry him around the room. But they wasn't allowed to. So now even the 16 hours a week they got through the VA finally through my help was not adequate enough to even move him around mobility-wise anymore, and they had to call ambulance. And and mind you, caseworkers, everyone who interacted with his wife would say how they couldn't communicate with her, couldn't understand her. It was hard to talk to her. She would just stumble and round words, and they didn't know if she was even comprehending things. They were very confused and worried and concerned, and I would have to clear that up when I would show up at the hospital and be like, that's just how she is. She's disability for her mental health. She's got her issues. That's just her. But that's, unfortunately, she took over, and so she was in charge in her eyes, even though technically my dad was still competent. He wasn't going to stand up for himself. He even tried once to speak up for himself, and I have that on video, and the people of authority in the room completely dismissed him and said, well, your wife has the control. He was still competent. It was wrong of them. But my dad became quiet because that's what he does. He gives up. He gives up, and it took him a lot to fight for me in that moment and stand up for me and say that she was lying about me. She did a demon, exorcism on me in the middle of a hospital, saying that I was possessed by demons all the time and was doing an exorcism and making a scene, saying I brainwashed him, saying I was staying overnight to be manipulative and take control of him and brainwash him, and it wasn't just because I loved my dad very much and wanted time with him. This is the only chance I had because you won't allow me in your home. So ultimately, when it came closer to the end, I didn't get to see him until he was in the hospital. After, it's already been a couple months, and we were trying to get something else arranged, and it was going to be that Friday, but then he ended up being in the hospital before then. We weren't really sure what brought him to the hospital. We got there, we saw him, I gave him gifts, and did whatever I could. I tried to make him happy and smile. He wanted to watch movies with me. We watched Y-Files together. I made him a tablet with all his favorite movies and shows that were so easy to use. You just press a button and it will play. But she wouldn't let him have it or use it. She snatched it off his head in spite because I gave it to him and it would comfort him, but she didn't care. She didn't care about that. She cared about herself and that it came from me, not that he would actually be comforted by it. And it's so utterly sad, but I did what I could. And I know it wasn't enough, but I was limited on keeping peace to be able just to see him, and then balancing that with fighting and advocating in areas where I could try, right? She wanted to wash her hands clean of him again, as she had done multiple times before with caseworkers. Said, I want nothing to do with him. I can't take care of him. Take him away. But there was